I want to recommend to you today that you evaluate the physical security requirements in the PCI DSS as it relates to how you interact with your AWS environment. A lot of times people put this to the side and they only consider the risk to the AWS environment, and they don't think about the risk that they face in the processes and the employee actions and the systems that are utilized to connect to the AWS environment. And I'll give you a few examples. When we conduct our physical security walkthroughs with our clients, sometimes we stumble upon things that make the scope larger than the applications or resources that are housed within AWS. For example, during one visit, we were talking to the developers of an organization, and we looked over on a shelf and we saw a laptop connected to network attached storage. And we asked, what is that laptop over there? And they said, oh, that's the backup of our production code. We take a snapshot of the code every night and we place it on that device, and that's where it resides in case of emergency. Well, that became very important to the scope, and now physical security requirements had to be considered for protecting that area. Another example is when we had worked in a remote sense with a client in order to review how they access their AWS environment, and we observed them connecting with multi-factor authentication across VPN in order to access their AWS account. They had established bastion hosts in order to take their offices and employee homes out of scope for the physical security requirements. But when we were on site and we were observing their processes, we found employees who were connecting to the AWS environment over SSH without multi-factor authentication. Now all of a sudden that laptop that employee was using was in scope. It was part of the cardholder data environment, and everything else that was connected to that laptop became in scope. And now that physical environment of where people were connecting to that AWS environment, because it was bypassing some of the other controls that they had set up, it made physical security a lot more important. So these are things to consider. Don't ignore these risks, because if you look at some of the recent news in data breaches, you'll find that attackers did have access to the development environment. They did have access to the build pipeline. And so physical security about who can access what and who can get to critical systems within your organization can be very, very important, and it should not be neglected when you're looking at physical security requirements in the PCI DSS.